Today, I thought we'd do something a little bit different. I was watching some YouTube videos recently about people getting their gear stolen, and I figured I would talk about at least some things that I'm doing that maybe can help you, plus some additional background that I have in this area. As some of you may know, I recently bought a Leica Q3, and I absolutely love this camera. I've been taking it a lot of places with me. I've been shooting a lot of photos. I make some of these YouTube videos using this camera, but I absolutely love this camera. Now, the things that I'm going to talk about today will apply to any camera or any kind of situation. But in this case here, we'll be talking about at least my gear. So we'll start with like very simple things, and then we'll work our way up into more complicated things. But the simplest thing that you could probably do is obviously just pay attention to your surroundings and have a good sense of control about where your gear is and how you're managing that. So things like wrist straps and camera straps and things like that. Because what we'll be talking about a little bit today is not only if it gets stolen, but if you damage it. And so these things are really expensive to damage. You typically will have to send them off back to Germany to get fixed. And I hear the repair time on these things could be upwards of a year to get them back. So I usually have a wrist strap on. I also carry my camera in a sling. It's a Peak Design sling. I have a Peak Design camera strap, so if I wanted to put it over me as well, at least it's not going to fall and drop and get damaged. But let's talk about more from a protection standpoint, not a lost and theft standpoint. So I have AirTags all through this thing. I have an AirTag in here. So if I misplace my bag or I leave it someplace where maybe somebody picked it up and I couldn't find it, I can at least track it down. If it gets stolen, that's a whole other topic we'll get into in a minute. And I know there's some pros and cons to AirTags, but let's just assume that I just left this someplace, I can at least find it. Same thing with this strap. So for example, if I had this connected to the camera, I have an AirTag that's actually right here. And I've talked about this in other videos, but this actually screws into the strap and you need special screws to get this out. But at least there's an AirTag in here. So if, for example, I left my camera someplace without the bag and it has the strap on it, then at least I can track it back down. Now, same thing with it being stolen. So at least if it gets stolen and I have one of these two things, so let's say the burglar took the camera bag with the camera in it, then I at least have a little bit of time before the AirTag notifies the burglar, hey, you're carrying something with an AirTag on it, right? At least there's a little bit of time, not that I'm going to go chase the person down, but at least if I call the police and go through that process, there could be a possibility that they can maybe track that person and get my stuff back. There was a YouTube video where a gentleman left his camera bag somehow outside in Europe somewhere, and he was able to track it back down. Now, he went a different path where I'm not recommending this at all, where he went and chased the bag down and confronted the burglars. And I don't think I would personally do that, but he got his stuff back, or at least the majority of his stuff back. So the AirTags do work. I know there's a grip that's being developed or for sale. It's really on the pricey side. It's made by a company called Helium Design, I think. It's the guy that does the Two Blind Men and an Elephant YouTube channel. But he designed a grip for the Q series cameras, and I think now the M series cameras, that have an AirTag slot in the grip. And then on top of that, you need a special tool to take the grip off the camera. So the AirTag might be alerting the burglar, hey, you're carrying an AirTag with you, but there's no way for him to get the grip off the camera. And so then it just buys you more time to potentially recover the camera. So that's AirTags, and that's probably about all we're going to get into with that. But I wish Leica made a function in their app where you can mark the camera stolen. That would be great. And therefore, when it's, let's say the bad guy tries to connect it with a Leica app down the road, that at least it marks that as stolen, and maybe it bricks the camera. Like, that would be awesome. But they don't, at least not that I know of. But that would be great. Or if they can geolocate the camera for you, that'd be awesome too, if you can mark it stolen. But I don't think they do either of those two things. That's just like low tech, pretty cheap. And is it perfect? Absolutely not. So let's talk about what you should do. And this doesn't matter what kind of camera you have, you should probably get insurance. And camera insurance is really inexpensive. I think I pay about $178 a year, and I have about, I think, $7,000 worth of coverage. So I have a little bit of background in insurance. I did work at one point in my career for about 12 years with a major insurance company. So I do know a little bit about this particular space. You can get camera insurance with any major carrier, at least here in the United States. I'm not really sure about Europe, but I'm sure they have a similar thing. Now, different companies call them different things. Some are personal article floaters, some are valuable personal property insurance, some are just camera insurance, and that's fine too, but they all function generally the same way. And so let me explain this. You typically have your homeowner's policy or your renter's insurance policy, and those will cover you against typically theft, or if something happens to your dwelling and the item is in there. So let's say there was a fire, for example, and everything burned down, your camera is going to be typically covered. Same thing with theft. If somebody breaks into your house and they take all your stuff, typically your camera and everything will be covered. What these additional policies do is they cover theft, which is great, but they also cover damage. For example, let's say I'm out on vacation someplace and I drop my camera, or it falls out of my bag, or I'm at dinner and somebody knocks over a table and it breaks the lens. They didn't steal it, right? But they did damage it. And therefore, this thing then needs to go get replaced or fixed. And so that policy will cover that in most cases. So that's the difference between an individual policy and kind of your normal homeowners or renters policy. Also keep in mind, with a homeowner's policy or renter's policy, there's usually a deductible. So if your camera gets stolen and you're trying to file a claim against your renter's policy or your homeowner's policy, it's subject to the deductible, where typically these individual policies that we're talking about typically don't have a deductible. Again, each company has their own flavor of this. So you want to make sure that the company you're dealing with or you're buying through, what they cover, what they don't, and any kind of deductibles you might have to pay. So the other thing you want to look at when you're shopping around for these policies, because they all sound great, is what do they actually exclude? Because that's more important than what they advertise. You're going to have to probably get the policy and actually see what they exclude. Some policies might exclude to foreign countries or different foreign countries. So for example, you might go to Mexico on vacation and that'll be fine. But if you go to, let's say, an island out in the Caribbean, Jamaica, let's say, for example, that might not be covered at all. Again, I'm using those as examples. I'm not using them as any kind of knowledge, but I know there's certain countries that might have restrictions or limitations because the risk is higher for theft than in other locations. So again, look at your policy. Some damage might be covered and some may not. Some theft might be covered, some may not. Again, just depending on the individual carrier and its policy limitations. So that's really important to find out. Now, let's assume you had a loss, and we'll talk about theft. Let's say, for example, somebody went ahead and stole this camera. And they didn't steal the camera, they stole the bag. And with that bag, I had my tripod and my lenses and maybe a gimbal, right? They broke into my hotel room and they took all that stuff. All of that stuff should be covered up to your policy limits. So when you go buy a policy, you're going to tell the insurance company, here's what I want covered, or here's how much money I think I have in camera related equipment. And again, there's exclusions to this too. So for example, drones are not covered under your camera equipment, but tripods and gimbals and things like that should be. But again, each carrier is different. So let's say the bad guy broke into your hotel room and took all your stuff. All of that stuff, let's assume, is covered, but you're going to have to do some things. First thing you're going to want to do is file a police report. And on that police report, you need to be very detailed about what was stolen out of your hotel room, for example. Then you're also going to want to make sure that when you get home or wherever your documentation is, that you have documents for all this stuff. So when did you buy it, how much you paid for it, and what was the item? So I bought a DJI gimbal, for example. I bought it on this date, and this is how much I paid for it. And you're going to want records of all of these items because the insurance company will cover it, but they want to also make sure that you actually physically had a loss because that's what they're trying to cover. So same thing with the camera. My suggestion would be is to make sure you have the serial number for your camera, the date you purchased it, and where you bought it and how much you paid for it. And just put that in a file someplace, put it on a computer someplace. If you can take pictures also of your camera and the serial number, and that just proves that you have it, right? And so if you ever lost it or had it stolen, then at least you can prove that you had ownership of it. Because believe it or not, people sometimes try to commit fraud, and the insurance companies are really good about flushing that out. That's really important, is make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, that if you ever had something happen to your camera, that you can prove that you had this gear in your possession at one point in time. The other thing that you are going to want to do is make sure that you don't over-insure yourself or under-insure yourself. So underinsurance is, hey, I bought this camera. Let's say this is a very expensive camera. So let's say it was $5,000 and the bad guy came in and took all your camera gear. Well, you're only covered to $5,000. So if you had gimbals and filters and lenses, other lenses and things like that, none of that's going to be covered because the insurance company is only going to pay out to its policy limits. On the flip side, you don't want to say, I have $100,000 worth of camera gear, and you don't, because then you're just overpaying for insurance and you're never going to get any coverage for that amount. So it's always good to buy what you need and then review your policy every now and then. So let's say you started out with a camera, but then over the past year, you bought more stuff for it. Change your policy limits so that way it reflects the accurate amount of stuff that you own. And you should do that with any insurance, whether it's your homeowner's insurance or renter's insurance. If you went out and bought a big screen TV and you never had one of those before, you might want to make sure that your policy limits cover all that stuff. These kind of policies are really affordable when you think about it on a grander scale. Listen, everything is replaceable, right? But there's a process in order to get this stuff back if something goes wrong with it, that for the amount of time that you're going to have to put into it to file a claim and do a police report and keep records of things, makes getting something like this back fairly easy, as opposed to saving up enough money down the road and repurchasing stuff that you lost, damaged, or was stolen. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents. If you found this video helpful, please take action, because you know what? We're getting into the spring and the summertime. You're going to start going outside more. You're going to start traveling more. You're going to start bringing this thing outside more. I'm going to be bringing my camera outside more. If I dropped it or it got stolen, I would be heartbroken because I really do love this camera. And so now I know that if something like that did happen, I'd have the peace of mind that I can get it fixed without a lot of hassle. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.